The opening chapters of Crime and Punishment thrust the reader into the fevered consciousness of Rodion Raskolnikov, a former student reduced to poverty and isolated in his St. Petersburg garret. Dostoevsky masterfully establishes the novel's central conflict, the war between a cold, rationalizing intellect and an inherently moral soul. Through Raskolnikov's preparations and his fateful encounter with the drunkard Marmeladov, the first two chapters lay the psychological and philosophical groundwork for the crime to come.
The novel opens in a suffocating July heatwave. St. Petersburg is depicted as an oppressive force, its unbearable stink from drinking dens and crush of people mirroring Raskolnikov's internal torment. His living space, a garret resembling a cupboard, symbolizes his entrapment, while his avoidance of his landlady reveals a man paralyzed by debt and shame. Yet this mundane fear pales beside the hideous idea he has been nurturing for a month.
Raskolnikov is described as remarkably good-looking, but dressed in rags, a contradiction that highlights his fallen state. His journey to the pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, is a test of his own scheme. His internal monologue reveals his ambivalence. He despises his indecision. That's why I never do anything. Yet mocks himself for being scared of the merest trifle when contemplating murder. The famous line, "Man has the world in his hands, but he's such a coward," introduces his nascent theory that extraordinary men stand above conventional morality.
The visit to Alyona Ivanovna is laden with symbolic detail. The absurd top hat which he fears makes him conspicuous, represents his terror of the petty details that could unravel his plan, a paranoia that will later consume him. The pawnbroker herself is described with animalistic features. Neck, like a chicken leg, a subtle dehumanization that allows Raskolnikov to begin viewing her as an obstacle rather than a person. His meticulous observation of her keys and apartment layout confirms that, despite his verbal protests, his mind is methodically preparing for the act.
After leaving, Raskolnikov is overwhelmed by infinite disgust. He experiences a moment of clarity, exclaiming, "God, how revolting it all is." A genuine moral recoil. Yet he immediately suppresses it, entering a tavern to calm his nerves. A single glass of beer provides fleeting relief, but the chapter ends with him still oscillating between horror and determination, the trajectory toward crime now firmly established.
In Chapter 2, Raskolnikov encounters the retired official Marmeladov in a seedy tavern. This character is not a digression, but a grotesque mirror of Raskolnikov's own condition. Marmeladov, a drunkard who has squandered his family's last resources, embodies the total abasement that Raskolnikov both fears and scorns.
Marmeladov's drunken monologue introduces the concept of beggary, distinct from mere poverty. In poverty, you still retain the nobility of your innate feelings. In beggary, nobody retains it. This is the state to which he has sunk, a state defined by the loss of dignity. His story of his wife, Katerina Ivanovna, a once proud, educated woman reduced to poverty and illness, paints a brutal picture of social suffering. But the heart of his narrative lies with his daughter, Sonia, forced into prostitution to feed the family. Marmeladov recounts how, after Sonia's first act of self-sacrifice, her stepmother knelt and kissed Soneshka's feet, without saying a word. This moment of wordless compassion stands in stark contrast to Raskolnikov's cold rationalism. Later, Marmeladov confesses to stealing from his wife and begs Sonia for money. She gives him her last 30 kopecks without a word, a silent forgiveness presented as more agonizing than any reproach.
The chapter culminates in Raskolnikov visiting the Marmeladov home. The scene is one of extreme poverty. A cramped room, hungry children, Katerina Ivanovna in a frenzy of despair. Marmeladov is dragged by the hair while shouting, "I find pleasure in this." A grotesque expression of his self-destructive need for punishment. Raskolnikov leaves his last few kopecks on the windowsill. an impulsive act of charity, but then immediately rationalizes it with cynicism.
The encounter with Marmeladov acts as a catalyst. It forces Raskolnikov to confront the human consequences of poverty and sacrifice. His final thoughts after leaving are a direct reaction. But if that's not true, if man isn't actually a scoundrel, then all else is mere preconception, and there are no barriers. He sees Marmeladov's abject humility and rejects it. If humanity is inherently base, he reasons, then moral laws are merely preconceptions invented to control the weak.
Together, these chapters establish the novel's central dialectic. Chapter 1 introduces Raskolnikov's isolation and his intellectual justification for transgression. Chapter 2 presents a world of suffering and self-sacrifice that challenges that justification. Sonia's response to her fate is not rebellion, but radical compassion, a moral force Raskolnikov cannot yet comprehend. As he walks away, he convinces himself that he must break the barriers of conventional morality. Yet the reader senses that the image of Sonia's silent suffering has planted a seed of doubt. The stage is set not just for a crime, but for a profound spiritual battle.
Please like and subscribe if you want to support the channel.